What if a single word could seal your fate in a world where silence was demanded, where the mere echo of a woman's voice might summon chains and shadows? In the shadowed corners of medieval Europe, from the mist-shrouded cobbled streets of England to the winding riverside towns of France and the fortified villages of Germany, women navigated their supposed crimes ranging from idle gossip and heated arguments to accusations of witchcraft or mere displays of independence, invited punishments meticulously crafted to shatter not just the body, but the very essence of the soul, embedding fear deep into the fabric of society. Join us as we delve into the chilling realities of these ordeals, drawing from historical records, court transcripts, and eyewitness accounts that reveal a society gripped by an unyielding fear of female agency and control, where the intertwined powers of the church and crown enforced obedience through a tapestry of terror and ritual. These stories, unearthed from dusty archives like parish ledgers and Kirk session minutes, remind us of an age when women's voices were systematically muffled, their bodies broken as public spectacles. In this exploration, we uncover not only the mechanisms of punishment but the broader societal undercurrents that fueled them, from religious fervor to patriarchal anxieties, painting a portrait of a time when the boundaries between sin, heresy, and simple humanity blurred into oblivion. Have you ever wondered what price a woman paid for speaking her mind in a time when her voice was deemed a threat to the very foundations of family, community, and faith? In the 16th and 17th century realms of England and Scotland, the Scold's bridle, also known variably as the brank or gossip's bridle, emerged as a formidable tool of silencing, forged in cold iron and steeped in malice, designed specifically to curb the tongues of those labelled as scolds or gossips. This intricate iron framework enclosed the head like a merciless cage, with a spiked plate or bit pressing firmly down upon the tongue, ensuring that every desperate attempt at speech or cry brought forth waves of agony, a sharp and unrelenting reminder that words could wound the speaker far more profoundly than any listener. Historical accounts from locales such as Walton-on-Thames, these women, sometimes dragged from their homes amid jeering crowds, were paraded through bustling villages or market squares to endure layers of public mockery, their muffled pleas lost in the clamour, as bells occasionally attached to the bridle jingled mockingly with each step, amplifying the spectacle of their humiliation. It wasn't merely physical pain that defined this punishment. It served as a stark, enduring reminder of societal expectations, rigorously enforced by local magistrates, town councils, and Kirk sessions, those ecclesiastical courts in Scotland that wielded moral authority with an iron fist, where even Quaker women, daring to preach their faith in quiet acts of defiance against established norms, faced similar fates. Their earnest testimonies twisted into perceived threats against the fragile moral order of the community. Though never formalized as a legal punishment in the strictest sense, its widespread use by barony courts and local assemblies underscores how deeply ingrained was the fear of female autonomy, a fear that permeated every stratum of society, from rural hamlets to urban centers. The bridle, with its cruel efficiency, left not only physical scars that lingered long after the metal was pried away, but also psychological wounds, etching into the collective psyche the perilous cost of verbal. This device, emblematic of an era's obsession with control, highlights how punishments were tailored to exploit vulnerabilities, turning the act of speaking one of humanity's most basic freedoms into a forbidden peril, and forcing women to weigh every word against the shadow of retribution. Picture yourself bound to a wooden chair, teetering precariously on the edge of icy, unforgiving waters, would survival in those depths prove your guilt or your innocence, or merely prolong the inevitable torment? Across the expanse of medieval and early modern Europe, the ducking stool or cucking stool, as it was sometimes called, became a dreaded instrument of judgment, blurring the precarious line between trial by ordeal and outright torment. In England from the 17th century onward, these offenders were strapped securely to a seesaw-like beam or pivoting chair, then plunged repeatedly into the murky depths of rivers, ponds, or even village duck ponds, their bodies subjected to the relentless chill until exhaustion or hypothermia claimed them, their lungs aching with each frantic gasp for air amid the submerging waves. Records from places like Leominster in Herefordshire meticulously note its application for disorderly women who dared to argue publicly, gossip unchecked, or challenge her soul cleared, but her life extinguished. If she floated, buoyed perhaps by sheer desperation or chance, she was branded a sorceress, condemned to further interrogation or execution under the weight of divine judgment. This method, deeply rooted in traditions of public humiliation and what was perceived as supernatural arbitration, women like those ensnared in the infamous Pendle witch trials of 1,612 inches Lancashire endured such watery ordeals, their fates capriciously decided by the whims of turbulent waters and the entrenched prejudices of male-dominated courts, where accusations often stemmed from petty disputes or superstitions rather than evidence. The ducking stool's origins trace back to Anglo-Saxon times, evolving from simpler forms of exposure like the cucking stool, a stationary seat for public shaming, into this dynamic engine of correction, as described in medieval texts such as William Langland's Piers Plowman from 1378, which references it as a women's punishment for verbal transgressions. In colonial Virginia, influenced by English common law, it persisted as a tool to discipline outspoken women, blending humiliation with physical peril to enforce gender norms. These immersions were not. The practice waned only in the 19th century, as Enlightenment ideals began to question such barbarities, yet its legacy endures in folklore, a haunting echo of how water, that life-giving element, was weaponized to drown out dissent and submerge the spirit of independence. How must it feel to stand before flames that promise not just death, but utter obliteration? Joan of Arc's tragic execution in Rouen in 1431 exemplified this visceral horror, where the young visionary, clad in a simple shift, was bound tightly to a wooden post amid a thronging crowd of spectators, her body slowly consumed by roaring flames for her alleged crimes against the church and crown charges of heresy, witchcraft, and cross-dressing that masked deeper fears of her military and spiritual influence, her final cries swallowed by the witch hunt records, spanning the peaks of persecution from 1,560 to 1,630 inches. Regions like the Holy Roman Empire estimate that thousands of women perished in this manner, often following grueling sessions of torture in dimly lit chambers where inquisitors, armed with racks and thumbscrews, extracted confessions of dire. In areas such as Savoy and the Rhineland, these executions unfolded as grand spectacles, drawing entire towns to the central squares where the condemned midwives, healers, widows, and ordinary women whose knowledge or solitude aroused suspicion were paraded in carts, their heads shorn and bodies marked with symbols of infamy, before being tied to stakes surrounded by bundles of dry wood and kindling. The flames ignited as a ritual that blended unbridled religious fervor with a societal purge aimed at rooting out perceived threats to orthodoxy. The association of witchcraft with heresy dated back to early church fathers like Augustine, who viewed such practices as idolatrous sins of the will, but it intensified during the late medieval period as fears of demonic conspiracies intertwined with anxieties over social upheaval, leading to waves of trials where women, disproportionately targeted due to prevailing misogynistic views, faced the stake as a means to cleanse communities. Not all burnings were for witchcraft. Some stemmed from religious dissent, as in the case of heretics during the Inquisition, but the method's prevalence in witch hunts, peaking in the early modern era, rather than strictly medieval, underscores a continuum of terror that links spiritual deviance with gendered control. The smoke rising from these pyres carried more than ashes. It bore a pervasive warning to onlookers, etching into the collective memory the dire cost of stepping beyond the rigid boundaries of accepted roles, where a woman's intuition or independence could be reframed as infernal alliance. Even figures like Joan, later rehabilitated and canonized, could not escape the immediate horror, their stories surviving only through the resilience of historical narrative against the flame's intent to annihilate. Imagine the slow, insidious pierce of iron against bare skin, every subtle shift, a fresh reminder of your utter vulnerability. What unimaginable lengths would a society's deepest fears drive it to in the name of maintaining an ironclad, particularly women charged with infidelity, sorcery, or other forms of moral deviance, their bodies compelled to endure a throne of unrelenting agony that rewarded absolute stillness with mere survival, while punishing any movement with escalating pain. Variations of this device, such as the infamous Judas chair employed in the shadowy confines of the Inquisition. Meanwhile, the broader spectrum of public humiliation flourished as a parallel and pervasive horror, ensnaring women in rituals designed to strip away dignity layer by layer. They were stripped bare or clad in rags, whipped through teeming markets with lashes that drew welts without excessive gore, or confined in cucking stools and ducking apparatuses for offences like scolding, as evidenced in 14th to 17th century, where parish ledgers detail harrowing cases of women paraded in wooden stocks or pillories, their faces smeared with filth or adorned with placards proclaiming their sins to all who passed. These acts, meticulously documented in legal transcripts and communal archives, transcended mere justice to become elaborate spectacles of control, etching indelible warnings into the collective memory through the potent alchemy of shame and suffering, ensuring that the degradation of one woman served to silence a multitude, their gazes averted in fearful solidarity. In bustling centres like Nuremberg or Paris, such punishments reinforced the invisible yet impenetrable chains of gender hierarchy, where a woman's body became the unwilling canvas for societal fears, painted with stripes of control and hues of subjugation that lingered in the air like unspoken edicts. Devices like the shangaigi or neck fiddle, akin to portable pillories, forced offenders to wear their shame around their necks, hands locked in wooden frames that mimicked violins, parading them through streets as objects of ridicule. The Scold's thew, or ducking chair, rare survivals of which whisper of their ubiquity, extended these methods, often intertwined with other tools like the brank, reveal a pattern where public visibility amplified the penalty, turning personal failings into communal lessons, and underscoring how medieval Europe's punitive arsenal was calibrated to exploit the social bonds that women wove, unraveling them thread by thread in the pursuit of conformity. In an era where the faintest whispers could ignite roaring infernos of accusation and retribution, medieval women bore the crushing weight of punishments that resonated far beyond their immediate time, shaping subsequent generations with tales of torment passed down in hushed, reverent tones around flickering hearths. These ordeals, intricately woven from the enduring threads of fear, unwavering faith, and unyielding control, reflect a perilously fragile balance between the wielders of power and those ensnared in vulnerability, where the demarcation between accuser and accused proved as tenuous as a witch's fragile threads. As we pause to reflect on these lingering shadows of the past, casting long across the corridors of history, one profound question lingers in the enveloping quiet, echoing through the ages like a distant, unanswered plea. How perilously close are we, in our modern guise, to unwittingly repeating the insidious cycles of silence, subjugation, and erasure that once defined the very essence of survival? Or have we truly, irrevocably escaped the clutches of those ancient, unrelenting fears that still whisper in the wind?